I know a lot of you, some of you are not into supporting the presidential election and whatever it is, what it is. I'm not voting for Kamala or Donald Trump. I'll be supporting Jill Stein. But I always encourage those of you to go out and support the ballot measures for your state. We've already covered California and Alabama, and now we're moving into Arizona. All I know is that Arizona is a hot place. So let's see what's happening in Arizona this year. What is going to be on the ballot? First and foremost, in Arizona, citizens there may initiate a legislation and amendments through the process of direct initiative. This is the one of the easier ways. This means successful petitions bypass the Arizona legislature and go directly on the ballot for voters to vote on. My state is the opposite. Massachusetts here, it's indirect. We can't bypass the legislator. That is why states like California and Arizona often have more ballot measures than we do. I think we have 5. California, I think, had maybe 14. Arizona has quite a bit as well. So let's go ahead and jump down here. The single subject rule. Arizona Constitution contains a single subject rule for citizen initiative ballot measures, and that was enacted in 2022. So what that means, folks, is that you can't have 2 subjects under one ballot measure. That they have to be separate. In Arizona, initiated measures and amendments are not governed by subject restrictions, but are required to designate a funding source if they mandate state expenditures. So let's go ahead and see the proposition for Arizona. We're going to scoot ahead here. Okay. Proposition 133, require partisan primaries and prohibit primaries where candidates compete regardless of party affiliation amendment. Interesting. A yes vote supports this constitutional amendment to require partisan primary elections for partisan offices, prohibit primary elections where all candidates, regardless of political party affiliation, run in the same primary election, such as top 2, top 4, and top 5 primaries. Provide that the state's direct primary election law supersedes local charters and ordinances that are inconsistent with that law. So it says this is current practice in Arizona. The constitutional amendment would add this practice to the Constitution, prohibiting future changes without another constitutional amendment. So that's important to note. Who supports this? Mainly Republican senators, right? And representatives. All the Republican Party supports it. Organizations, Arizona Free Enterprise Club and Heritage Action for America. Here's one of the arguments. Most voters are not centrist. Most voters are left, or most voters are right. And so by structuring a system where all we can get out of its moderates, nobody gets their first choice. That is interesting. Who's opposed to this? State Senator Priya, who's a Democrat. Organizations that are against it is the Arizona Public Health Association, the League of Women Voters of Arizona, and Represent.us. Here's one of the arguments. With this, we are preempting the ability of local political subdivisions from holding elections in a certain format that they may see fit for their own political locality. Our cities have methods for regulating their process, and there's no need for the entire state to have to weigh in on the way our cities conduct their own elections. What we should be doing is allowing the laboratories of democracy to participate as the laboratories of democracy. So far, there's been no money spent to support or oppose this. Here's a note here from Roger Meadows, who helps me out with these. He said, of course, this was put there by the legislator, always trying to divide the electorate with their partisanship, keeping us busy instead of at their throats. 30.06% of Arizonians are Democrat, 34.13 are Republican, and 29.15 are non-affiliated. This explains why they're a swing state. My solution would be a CICA, citizen-initiated constitutional amendment, to make the existence of political parties anywhere in the state of Arizona unconstitutional. This applies to not just the electorate, but to those who serve in government, regardless of the level of government they wish to serve, and no matter the location they wish to serve. That's an interesting one. Arizona Proposition 134, signature distribution requirement for initiatives amendment. A yes vote supports establishing a signature distribution requirement for citizen initiatives, meaning that instead of requiring 10% of votes cast for the governor statewide for initiated state statutes for the ballot, and 15% of votes for 15% of votes cast for the governor statewide to qualify initiated constitutional amendments for the ballot, the initiative would require signatures from 10% of votes cast for the governor in each legislative district to qualify initiated state statutes for the ballot, and require signatures from 15% of votes cast for each governor in each legislative district. So what they're doing here is that they're trying to move this from the 10% votes cast for governor statewide. They're trying to move it from statewide to legislative district. And let's go a little bit further into this. Who supports it? State Representative David Livingston, he's Republican. Organization Arizona Farm Bureau and Arizona Free Enterprise Club. Here's one of the arguments. We need to recognize that counties outside Maricopa matter, and this makes sure the other 14 counties matter. That's interesting. Who's opposed to this? Of course, Democratic Party. State Senator Juan Mendez. Organizations opposed to it: Arizona Public Health Association, the League of Women Voters of Arizona. Here's one of the arguments here. This is effectively going to allow a single partisan legislative district to block the desires of the whole state. There is no money spent to support or oppose it. A note here from Roger, they say legislate the districts, but they don't specify which legislative districts. Is it congressional districts, state Senate districts, state house districts, or municipal districts? Unless they're talking about all of them, if that's the case, this will be a big hell no. And that's something that happens sometimes with these ballot measures, is that they leave things kind of vague so that you don't know. And that's usually done when they either want something to pass. So it's like you're hesitant. So you're just like, yes, okay, whatever. I think that sounds right. Or you're hesitant. You're like, no, I don't understand it. So whatever. But sometimes that's done on purpose. Arizona Proposition 135, Emergency Declarations Amendment. A yes vote supports providing the state legislature to terminate a state of emergency or alter the emergency powers granted to the governor during a state emergency, and providing a state emergency to automatically terminate 30 days after it is declared, unless the state legislature extends the emergency powers granted to the governor, except in cases for a state of war emergency or an emergency arising from a flood or a fire. That is interesting. So who supports that? State Representative Joseph Chaplick, he's Republican. Organizations, the Arizona Free Enterprise Club. Here's one of the arguments. While reforms are necessary, it is crucial to have a mechanism in place now that ensures proper checks and balances of the delegated authority, no matter what current or future statutes on emergency powers look like. The most appropriate place to resolve these fundamental questions of how our government functions and how to employ checks and balances is within the framework of the Constitution. Right now, it is entirely devoid of a process for the legislator to check executive authority. That's why it's critical that the legislator send HCR 2039 to the voters. If it's passed, It will answer this question in the Arizona Constitution to restrict the power of the governor during a declared emergency. After the declaration, the governor would be required to call the legislature into a special session by the 10th day, and it would automatically terminate after 30 days unless extended by concurrent resolution of the legislator. That's interesting. Who's opposed to it? The Democrat state representative or state senator Priya, of course. Organizations: Arizona House Democrats, Arizona Public Health Association, and the League of Women Voters of Arizona. Here's one of the arguments. The reality is that once a state emergency is called, it slips quickly from the media and the minds of the public. However, the lasting effects are ongoing and deeply personal for millions of Arizonans. There has been no campaign finance money spent to support or oppose. Roger says that he would vote for this. Okay. Now we get to, are these all, hold on one second. I was just making sure when we got to, because we have to start. I'm going to come back to that amendment one because that one's pretty lengthy. I should have started with the propositions. So I'm going to come back to that one and we're going to dive into the propositions. Arizona Proposition 137, in term limits and retention elections for Supreme Court justices and Superior Court justices, judges amendment. A yes vote supports ending term limits for the state Supreme Court justice and Superior Court judge, replacing them with terms of good behavior unless decided otherwise by a judicial review commission. And it would end retention elections at the end of the judicial term. Interesting. We're talking about term limits, ladies and gentlemen. Who supports this? Republican Party, State Representative Alexander Culloden and State Senator David Gowan. Also, the Arizona Judges Association. Here's one of the arguments here. Judicial retention is not really working. Our judicial retention process is leading to these ballots that are pages of pages of pages. There's like a full third of voters who aren't even voting on judicial retention, which is not a helpful check in our system of checks and balances. Who opposes this? The Democratic Party. Senator Flavio, Caesar, and Laura. The League of Women Voters of Arizona, Progress Arizona. And one of the arguments is this one here from Representative Ortiz. Now, as much as ever, the people are aware of the tremendous power and the way it can be abused. SCR 1044 would take away my right and the right of my constituents who want to vote to not retain those justices who approved the 1864 abortion ban. This is what authoritarianism looks like, folks. It's terrifying. No money spent to support or oppose. A note here from Roger. Vote to end term limits for the highest court in the state and only serving as long as they are serving in good faith and under good behavior, making them like a Supreme Court of the United States. Hell to the no. You knew this was put on the ballot by the legislator, not the citizens. So that is very scary. And if I was in Arizona, I would vote against that. That's very scary. Here's something that's different for wages. Proposition 138, wages for tipped workers amendment. I think we have this on the ballot in Massachusetts as well this year. This was a big one that's getting a lot of buzz, ladies and gentlemen. A yes vote supports allowing for tipped workers to be paid 25% less per hour than the minimum wage if any tips received by the employee were not less than the minimum wage plus $2 for all hours worked. Okay, let's pause for a second. I really want to break this down. So if you're a waitress or a bartender and you're working for tips, if you vote yes for this measure, it means that you will be able to get paid 25% less per hour than the minimum wage if any of your tips received by yourself were not less than the minimum wage plus $2 for all hours worked. So here's why I think this is going to be a problem. A lot of times, for those of us that have waited, I used to wait tables, those of us that waited tables, sometimes you get credit card tips and sometimes you get cash tips. The reality is, most of the time, waiters don't enter their cash tips. The credit card tips are automatically entered into the system. But the cash tips, most people don't enter that. So how are they going to know what your tips actually were if some of your tips are cash? Anybody want to tell me? Because this one, I don't know. The one from Massachusetts is not worded this way. The one from Massachusetts is to increase the minimum wage for tip workers. But this one, right, Cynical says this was deliberately confusing. Yeah, like this, I don't know that, like, how are they going to know? This was going to be tough. This was going to be tough. And I wouldn't be surprised if more waiters or whatever, if the customer asks, is it better for me to leave it in the tip on the credit card or cash? I wouldn't be surprised if more waiters are going to say cash. So yeah, Soccer Papa said, that's why I always tip cash. Yeah, if you can, because okay. So it goes on to say that businesses in Arizona can pay tip workers $11.35, which is $3 less than the current minimum wage of $14.35 an hour. So in Massachusetts, like, our tip workers aren't making $11 an hour, just so FYI. We don't make that much. So it goes on to say, under this new amendment, businesses would be able to pay workers $3.58 less than the current minimum wage of $14.35, which is basically $10.77 an hour, provided that the total take-home pay of each worker is at least the hourly minimum wage plus $2 for each hour worked. I can see this being a problem. I can see this being a problem. And honestly, I think all this could be avoided if they just paid people living wage. Like, this is ridiculous. Marianne said, what happened? Too many waiters made it to Club Med or something. I'm wondering about that too. Like, this is a yikes. Who supports this? Republican Party, State Senator Javin Daniel Messner, State Representative Justin Wellmuth, organizations, Arizona Restaurant Organization, and of course they would, right? Here's one of the arguments. We all know that the restaurant industry is a very small profit industry. If you have a disparity in a forced race of cost for a business, they will either shut down, limit staff, or make other alternatives. So this makes me wonder if this is basically the Arizona Restaurants Association's way of clapping back at the increase of minimum wage. It makes me wonder if that's why they're doing this, because they're like, well, we increased our minimum wage and that's put a dent on the restaurant, so we have to find a way to get that profit back. That's what it makes it seem like to me. So who opposes it? Raise the Wage Arizona. They're the ones that oppose it. What's interesting is I don't see any Democrat politicians that oppose this. So what does that tell you? The argument here is that if they're saying that the restaurants need to use the tips that the servers earn to cover their responsibility to pay the worker, then that restaurant's not a very good business. Businesses can afford to pay the workers a fair share. And there is no reason why the boss should get to take credit for the tip that the server earns. Oh, honey, I don't know. I'm not in Arizona, but I can see this becoming a problem if this one were to pass. So I'm not feeling good about that one, guys. Zero money spent to support or oppose. Commentary from Roger says, oh, hell to the no. Again, you know this was put on the ballot as a legislative referred and not by the citizens. Just look at who supports it and who opposes it. Right. Like that one is a woo. And then here's another big one, guys. And we'll end up finishing up Arizona tomorrow night. Proposition 139, the Right to Abortion Initiative. A yes vote supports amending the state constitution to provide the fundamental right to abortion that the state of Arizona may not interfere with before the point of fetal viability. I want to make sure I explain this correctly. That is defined as the point of pregnancy when there is significant chance of the survival of the fetus outside of the uterus without the application of extraordinary medical measures. Unless it is justified by compelling state interest defined as a law or regulation enacted for the limited purpose of improving or maintaining the health of the individual seeking abortion care that does not infringe on the individual's autonomous decision making. What is the status in Arizona? Currently in Arizona, abortion is legal for up to 15 weeks of pregnancy. So that's where it stands currently. And it goes on to say here, the Arizona State Senate voted 16-14 to pass the repeal on May 1st, 2024. In Arizona, a repeal can only take effect 90 days after the adjournment of the state legislature. May 13th, the Arizona Supreme Court granted a motion to stay the enforcement of the 1864 law until August 12, 2024. On June 15th, 2024, the Arizona State Legislature adjourned, meaning that the bill repealing the ban will become effective before the court order that would have reviewed the law. Okay. Arizona for Abortion Access is leading the campaign in support of this initiative. Who supports it? The Democratic Party, Governor Katie Hobbs, Jackie Rawson, Athena Salmon. Organizations called Indivisible Project, ACLU of Arizona, Arizona Public Health Association, the League of Women Voters, Planned Parenthood Advocates of Arizona, the Fairness Project, and Think America. And here's one of the arguments. To the people across Arizona who are concerned about the future of abortion rights in our state, who are worried about their bodily autonomy, who don't want to see the freedoms of their wives, sisters, and daughters restricted, you can make your 2 cents known at the ballot box, and I encourage you to do so. Okay, guys. So again, this is another reason why I say if you do not want to vote for the president, whatever it is, what it is, but if you live in a ballot measure state, you definitely want to make sure you're paying attention to what's on the ballot for your state and at least go to vote for or against those ballot measures. That is very important. Because again, sometimes these things go by and people don't know about it and people are like, I didn't even know that passed. So this is important. It Goes Too Far is leading the campaign opposing the initiative. It is opposed by Priests for Life, Students for Life Action, and Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. And one of the arguments here says Governor Hobbs and her pro-abortion allies will pour millions into deceiving the voters about the upcoming amendment that permits abortion on demand when babies can feel pain and survive outside the womb. We must defeat this extreme measure that would force Arizonans to pay for abortions and eliminate health protections for women. That sounds so extreme there, the way that she worded that. Now, there is campaign money spent to apply to this measure, it looks like there's over 21 million spent to support it and over 836,000 to oppose it. So just FYI, they put a lot of money into this one, folks. A lot of money. Ranked choice voting. This is a big one. A lot of people talk about ranked choice voting. If you're in Arizona, this will be on your ballot. Arizona Proposition 140, single primary for all candidates and possible ranked choice voting general election initiative. Say what? A yes vote supports this ballot initiative to change the state's electoral system, including replacing partisan primaries with primaries in which candidates, regardless of partisan affiliation, appear on a single ballot and a certain number advance to the general election, such as top 2 or top 4 primaries. Requiring candidates to receive a majority of votes in general elections, requiring the use of ranked choice voting in general elections when 3 or more candidates advance from the primaries for one winner general elections, and prohibiting using public funds to administer partisan primaries at the state, federal, and local levels, except for presidential preference primaries that allow independents to participate. Okay, Arizona. Arizona has a pretty large independent population. Note, please read the text, the red text in the next section. I know it's long, but very important for Arizonans to understand. So here we go. In the existing system, Arizona has semi-closed partisan primaries in which voters registered with political parties choose their party candidate for the general election. Independents can participate in one party's primary. The candidate who receives the most votes advances to the general election, where the candidate competes against other political party nominees and independent candidates. Voters elect 2 candidates per district for the Arizona House of Representatives, in which case 2 candidates can advance from political parties' primaries. For Proposition 140, there will be no partisan primaries. Rather, candidates would appear on a ballot and a certain number would advance to the general election. Does everybody understand that? I want to be that very clear what this is about for Arizona. Candidates could list their partisan affiliation, and political parties could endorse candidates. The Arizona state legislature would need to pass a bill to determine the number of candidates that advance from primary to general election. This could be top 2 primaries, like those used in California and Washington state, top 5 primaries, or a number in between. In Alaska, for example, top 4 primaries are used. For the 2 winter elections for the Arizona House, the number of candidates advancing from the primaries could be from 4 to 7. Legislators would have until November 1st, 2025 to get this passed. Should that not occur before the deadline, the Arizona Secretary of State would determine the number of legislators and could change the number after that, but not for 6 years. For the general election system, in the existing system, the candidate who receives the highest number of votes is elected to the office. With the Arizona House, the 2 candidates who receive the highest number of votes are elected. This is known as plurality voting system. For Proposition 140, candidates would need to receive a majority of votes in general elections. This means they would need to secure more than half of the total of votes, not just the highest number. This is interesting, guys. This is known as a majority voting system. When 2 top primaries are used, 2 candidates advance to the general election, so one candidate will win more than half the votes unless there's a tie. With the top 3 top 4 or top 5 primaries, multiple candidates advance to the general election, and one can receive the most votes without securing a majority of votes. Proposition 140 would require ranked choice voting in general elections when something other than the top 2 primaries or top 4 primaries for 2 winter elections, like those for the state house, is used. So this is important, guys. Here's some other changes as well. Proposition 140 would amend the Arizona Constitution to prohibit denying or restricting citizens' rights to vote, hold office, or choose candidates based on their partisan affiliation or non-affiliation. The ballot initiative would also prohibit using public funds to administer partisan primaries at the federal level, state level, and local level, as well as for political parties' precinct committee officers. However, public funds could be used for presidential preference elections in which independents and those registered with non-qualified parties can vote in the political party presidential primaries. So, who is supporting this? The Make Elections Fair PAC is leading the campaign in support of this. Mayor of Mesa, John Giles, who is nonpartisan, supports it. And of course, House Speaker Russell Bowers, who is Republican, also supports this measure. We have bipartisanship going on here. Cesar Chavez, Terry Goddard, Aaron Lieberman. We have Democrats, Republicans, and nonpartisans supporting this ranked choice measure in Arizona. Arizona Forward Party supports this. So that's Andrew Yang's project. Professional Firefighters of Arizona and some of the organizations that support it, you can see that here, like Veterans for All Voters and Independent Voters for Arizona. Here's one of the arguments. Our election process has been hijacked by 2 extreme parties. The 2 parties have become much more extreme over time in their views and how elections are run because it attracts money and influence. A majority of people have chosen to disassociate themselves from those 2 parties. Hey, and you know what? Power to them. This will be on the ballot, you guys. So it looks like you're getting the opportunity to possibly have ranked choice voting in Arizona. I think it's a big plus. Who is opposing? Justin Wadsack and Austin Smith. They're Republicans, a political party. The Green Party of Arizona opposes it. And the Republican Party of Arizona opposes it. This is interesting. Organizations, Arizona Free Enterprise Club, League of Women Voters of Arizona oppose it. And I want to give an explanation here. It says here that Republicans don't want Democrats voting for our primary candidates. And I'm sure Democrats don't want us voting for theirs. All unaffiliated voters, or as they are commonly referred to as independents, already can and do vote on the primaries to make their voices heard. That's interesting. So far, there has been over $6.9 million spent to support this measure and $0 spent to oppose it. So if we're following the money, this is probably more likely to pass, right? They're going to be able to put out more ads in favor of it. There's a note here from Roger Meadows, who helps us with the ballot measures. He said, as you can see, Sabrina, this amendment initiated by the citizens is in direct contrast with the first initiative, Proposition 133, put on the ballot by the Arizona legislator, who wishes to ratify the existing system into the Arizona Constitution. While this one changes it and ratifies it into the Arizona Constitution, you see how this is a struggle of supremacy over government between power up to the people, literally, and traditional power held by gatekeepers of the government, the politicians. This would get a definite yes vote for ratification. So yeah, I would vote for that. Proposition 311, criminal conviction fee for first responder death financial benefit measure. A yes vote supports establishing a $20 fee on every conviction for a criminal offense, which would go to pay a benefit of $250,000 to the spouse or children of a first responder who was killed in the line of duty. This is interesting. I want to highlight this part here. Are there existing benefits to first responders killed in the line of duty already? And it says the Federal Public Safety Officers Benefit Program provides a benefit of $422,000 to the surviving families of police officers who died in the line of duty. The Arizona pension system also provides a survivor benefit to the surviving spouse or children of police officers, firefighters, and corrections officers. Employers may also provide health benefits or life insurance benefits to the surviving families of police officers killed in the line of duty. Who supports this? David Gowan, Sal DeChico, a nonpartisan and a Republican. One of the arguments is that $250,000 can go a long way to help our families of those victims of crime, certainly when they are police officers and first responders who swore to defend and protect us. Who opposes it? Layla Alston, who's a Democrat, and the ACLU of Arizona. I do have a problem with this bill in that it creates another fine that is disproportionate to certain members of our population. And it would be a preferable option to me if we were to pay that death benefit directly out of the general fund to the family of the firefighter or police officer who was killed and not do any more fines in our legal system. That's interesting. There's over $131,000 spent to support it, no money spent to oppose it. And there's a note here from Roger. Nope. Even though this includes more than just police officers get enough immunity already. They don't need more of this included. Everyone else but police officers, I would probably vote yes. Proposition 312, property tax refund for non-enforcement of public nuisance law. A yes vote supports allowing for property owners to apply for a property tax refund if the city or locality in which the property is located does not enforce laws or ordinances regarding to illegal camping, loitering, obstructing public thoroughfares, panhandling, public urination and defecation, public consumption of alcoholic beverages, and possession or use of illegal substances. So it almost kind of sounds like this is applying to probably more so those that may be homeless. And what this is saying is that if these nuisance laws are not enforced, you can, I guess, get a refund of your property taxes for the city or the locality for not enforcing these laws. This is interesting. This part here I think is important. Under this measure, after the property owner applies for a refund, the town, city, or the county has 30 days to accept or reject the refund. If the refund is accepted, the refund will be paid to the property owner. If it's rejected, the property owner can file a cause of action in the Superior Court of the county to challenge the rejection of the refund. If the town, city, or county does not respond after 30 days, the property owner will receive a refund. Interesting. Who supports this? Republicans, Warren Peterson, Justine Watsock, and Ben Toma. Organizations, Goldwater Institute. Here's one of the arguments. We all know homelessness has been overtaking once beautiful cities all over the country. What it really boils down to is when we have citizens who break laws, the government has a lot of tools to go after citizens that don't follow the law. But when our government doesn't follow the law or enforce our law, our citizens are limited on what they can do. So yeah, as I was saying, it looks like it's a crackdown on homelessness. My response to that, give everybody homes. And then who opposed? Denise Epstein, Brian Fernandez and Priya Sundareshian, Democrats, oppose it. And the League of Arizona Cities and Towns also oppose it. And also the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. And they argue here, this bill is going to put cities in an impossible legal position. Instead of addressing the shortage of shelter capacity, this bill simply threatens to drain much needed resources and expose cities to further litigation. So far, there's no money spent to support or oppose this measure. A note here from Roger is, instead of resolving the homelessness crisis, this is what they need to do instead. This is what they do instead. If they wanted, they could outlaw private equity from operating in the state at all, allow municipalities to implement and enforce rent control. That is within 30% of the state or local minimum wage, charter a public bank to finance the construction of low income housing, to make part of government jobs guarantee. Due to the fact that housing construction is a money-making opportunity for construction companies, when you do rent control, that disincentivize construction companies from building their homes. That's why I say take it out of their hands, where instead having it part of the government jobs guarantee and steal the employees of those construction companies, paper them up and start constructing new homes for the homeless and low income or those making minimum wage. Proposition 313, life imprisonment for sex trafficking of a child measure. A yes vote supports this ballot measure to require that anyone convicted of child sex trafficking be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole or release. Well, just imagine if Diddy and all the rest of them were in Arizona. It goes on to say here, what would it change about it? It says that currently in Arizona, a person who is found guilty of that, of a child who is 15, 16, or 17 years of age can receive up to 10 to 24 years for a first-time offense. If they're found guilty for trafficking a child under 15 and is punished under ARS 13705, the Dangerous Crimes Against Children sentencing statute, and a first-time offender will receive a minimum of 13 years. So that's where it stands right now. They're trying to make this a life sentence. Who supports it? State Representative Selena Bliss. She's a Republican. Organization Center for Arizona Policy and Common Sense Action for America. One of the arguments, we're sending a strong message here in Arizona that our children are not safe, not now, not ever. Who opposes it? Denise Epstein and Annalise Ortiz. These are Democrats. Also, the League of Women Voters of Arizona. And they go on to say here, this is something that the experts in trafficking know. It happens that there are victims who are used to coerce other victims into the trade. That is a harsh reality, and we do not want those minors who have been severely traumatized locked up because of that bill. That's interesting. There's no money spent to support or oppose. And a note from Roger here says what Senator Mitzi Epstein said about minors can also be the ones going to prison for being coerced by adults should be given pause to. Proposition 314, Immigration and Border Law Enforcement Measure. A yes vote. This is interesting. Making it a state crime for non-citizens to enter the state at any location other than the port of entry. Allowing for state and local police to arrest non-citizens who cross the border unlawfully. Allowing for state judges to order deportations. Requiring the use of the E-Verify program in order to determine the immigration status of individuals before the enrollment in a financial aid or public welfare program. Making it a Class 6 felony for individuals to submit false information or documents to an employer to evade detection of employment eligibility or to apply for public benefits, and making the sale of fentanyl a Class 2 felony if the person knowingly sells fentanyl and it results in the death of another person. Who supports this? Republicans. One second. Republican Senator Ken Bennett, John Gillett, Alexander Collin, Ben Toma, candidate Carrie Lake. One of the arguments, given the lack of control of the border, I just feel it's something the state has to resolve. That's not stopping someone hundreds of miles inside the inner parts of the state. You've got to see them with your own eyes or have technological evidence. So it sounds like here, pardon me, guys, my nose is running. It sounds like here that the state of Arizona is taking matters into their own hands when it comes to the border and not relying on the presidency to do what they want them to do. I wonder if we're going to see this happen with more states. And who opposes it? Ruben Gallego, Katie Hobbs, and Mariana Sandoval. These are Democrats. Organizations that oppose it is the American Business Immigration Coalition. And of course, to name a few, the League of Women Voters of Arizona. And it says we're dead set against it. There's only so much we can do. Our policemen and women are not federal agents. They're not trained. What's going to happen to our safety and security if they're acting like border control agents? This is interesting. I wonder if this is going to pass in Arizona. There is no money spent to support or oppose it. And a note here from Roger, there are aspects of this that would make me vote for this. However, the legislature is doing what they're doing in absence of the federal government action, which I understand. And this should be the last one. Yeah, because Arizona was really long. I apologize, guys. And the last one here, Arizona Proposition 315. Legislative ratification of state agency rules that increase regulatory costs measure. A yes vote supports prohibiting a proposed rule from becoming effective if that rule is estimated to increase regulatory costs by more than $500,000 within 5 years after implementation, to be submitted to the Office of Economic Opportunity for review. The legislature or any person who is regulated by an agency proposing a rule may also request proposed rules to be sent to their office, to the Office of Economic Opportunity for review until the legislature enacts legislation ratifying the proposed rule. Okay, so that one is supported by Americans for Prosperity in Arizona. It is opposed by Arizona AFL-CIO and also the ACLU of Arizona. There's no money spent to support or oppose it. There's a note here from Roger that says, I see this as a way to stymie corporate law enforcement so they won't have the money to fight the shareholders who we need regulatory protection from. They disguise it as cost overrun, the whole being fiscally responsible. So Roger is saying he would vote against that. So interesting, folks. And ladies and gentlemen, that is Arizona. When I come back Tuesday night when I'm live, we're going to move on to, I think I'm doing Colorado next. I mean, I'm either doing Colorado or Massachusetts next. I forget. But we'll get all these done before November. So again, you will know what will be on the ballot. And as I told you before, don't stay home. Always come out and vote. If you don't want to vote for the presidential election, make sure you come out and vote for those ballot measures. That is very important.